TNA Wrestling crossed the line again with another action-packed, surprising, crossovering episode of TNA Impact as new allegiances are formed in TNA this week, and perhaps the system have become more stronger, if that's possible, than ever. We'll get onto that in a minute. First things first, some really exciting news from the world of TNA, and they are indeed walking with Elijah. We know Elijah, the former Elias, debuted last week on TNA Wrestling. Well, guess what? They have now signed Elijah to track. He is in TNA Wrestling going forward. A fantastic acquisition for TNA. Someone who is he's charismatic. Him and Joe Hendry, if you've already seen, have worked together, and we'll talk a bit more about him and Joe Hendry a little bit later. But a fantastic acquisition for TNA. Congratulations on yet another awesome acquisition. Lots of stuff to go on. We're going to try and make it a bit different this week. We're going to just maybe talk about not necessarily about the matches, but maybe the effects on the matches and such what. But I did at the start say that new allegiances are formed and perhaps the system are stronger than ever. Now, that's because this week on Impact, it kicked off with the system taking the microphone and, the system doing what the system does. However, the Colognes come out. Now, the Colognes Primo and Epico debuted last week. They have seemingly aligned themselves together to form they've joined the system of some sort, or at least agreed to coexist, which could spell a lot of trouble for TNA as we get more closer to Sacrifice in just a few short weeks' time. The card for Sacrifice is looking incredible. Some big matches were made on this show, and I've heard a few spoilers that I'm not going to get into on this show. And suffice to say, we are in for a treat. But the Colognes in the system, another tag team. We got Edwards and Myers. A great tag team. No, they've been tag teams in different. Myers with Cardona and Eddie Edwards was a tag team with the American Wolves with Davey Richards back in the day. So you got lots of tag team specialists in there. Then you got JDC, who was a part of obviously on Breezango in NXT, and Moose, who coincidentally made his wrestling debut on NXT this past week. And the Hardy Boys did obviously return to NXT this past week. Moose looked outstanding against Lexus King, by the way. If you haven't seen it, go and watch it. Hardy's rolled back the years like they do every week when they wrestle. The WWE NXT was fantastic, but interesting to put sort of the Colognes and the system working together. And what does that mean for everyone in TNA? It could be the rebirth of the system. When we spoke to Moose, he was kind of saying that they were regrouping together. And now they've added some more strength to that. And, Leon Slater did indeed confront the system, funnily enough, and the Hardys were backing him up. That there was a little bit of a push and a pull and a pull apart, but it didn't last very long. But nevertheless, I mean, it was absolutely ridiculous, with what the system could do now with the Colognes together. Santana was in action this week against Oro Mensah from Metaphor. Do you know what? Every week Santana did pick up the victory in this match, but every time I see Santana, he just impresses me even more. To be fair, Oro Mensah ate that $150 like he was starving hungry at the end of that match. Let me tell you. But do you know what? I mean, it showcased. I mean, this is the great thing about this NXT partnership or the WWE partnership or whatever you want to call it. You are going to get to see some of the showcases of NXT, like Oro Mensah with Femi and people like that. They're coming down there. So it's not like, don't mean this disrespectfully, it wasn't like the lower side of that, when we had sort of, the other guys at the start of the partnership. It didn't, it was kind of Joe Hendry was going to NXT, but TNA weren't really getting the right end of the stick. Now you're getting NXT champion. Now you're getting the tag team champions. Now you're getting Cora Jade. This partnership is really starting to cement itself now. And Santana and Oro Mensah was a brilliant example of the partnership working really well. Santana is still etching and clawing his way to get to that level. And don't forget, you're in NXT territory in Full Sail University as well. But Santana did indeed win this. And I'm really happy for him because, he's the one for me to watch out for. Him and Leon. Leon in the X division, Santana in the heavyweight division are the ones to watch out for in 2025. It could potentially be, uh, you know, Santana's year. However, he's still got an issue with Ali, and Ali was, I think, saying about, Ali was there, sorry, and backstage after they had a bit of a confrontation. It's going to be interesting, and they were there with the great hands and Tasha Steeles and everybody else. And yeah, it's an interesting one on this because Santana and Ali could have a really, really good program in TNA. They're good. What TNA do well is the program aspect, the wrestling aspect, the storyline build as well. And you can have a little trilogy of matches going. And Santana and Ali are definitely heading in the direction of a match. But I would like a little program between them. Ali coming back to TNA. And again, this is where you look at where TNA are now as a company. They're in a position now where these stars, Ali didn't get a real opportunity in WWE. He was there last year. He done a great X Division champion, done really, really well, left and come back. Santana, someone that was in AEW. He was in TNA. He went to AEW. He had a great run. It didn't work out near the end, issues, whatnot. Got a point to prove, comes to TNA. Elijah, a massively, guy in the WWE that was so popular, questionable with the whole Elijah and the other family when he was everyone else, when he was, being somebody else. But the talent and what he can bring to TNA. And you look at all that and you're kind of forgetting the fact that they've lost like the Speedball Baileys, the Trent Sevens, the Josh Alexanders, the John Greshams. That's not a bad thing. I mean, the guys that left were fantastic. They were really, really good. And, they will be missed in TNA. But when you look at the people that they're bringing in and the star power of the people they're bringing in, again, I'm not saying that these other guys weren't stars, but named value. It isn't the case of we'll go and pluck somebody over here. It's like this guy was a household name in the WWE. This guy was a household name in TNA or the AEW. We'll bring those in. The name value, the reputation, what the company's trying to do. And it's really, really working. Excuse me. I'm looking forward to this continuing on. Anyway, let's move to Tessa Blanchard. She's been kind of not performing in TNA. Not performing, but just not getting in the ring. And Santino was really annoyed with it. And he said last week, she was meant to wrestle last week. Doctor's note prevented her from doing so. And Santino said, if you don't wrestle this week, you're fired. Well, she did wrestle this week against Kelsey Heather. You know where it's going. It was kind of an easy win, to be quite honest with you. On this, Masha Slamovich was watching out the back. Those two are on a collision course. However, before we get there, Cora Jade attacks Masha Slamovich. Now she's getting a title opportunity, I believe, sacrifice to go for Masha in a match that should be really, really good. Cora Jade, multiple time NXT champion, the bad girl of NXT, coming up against Masha Slamovich for the Knockouts Championship. It's going to be really, really interesting to see what happens on TNA going forward. We mentioned Joe Hendry. We mentioned Elijah. They were confronted by the system with Alicia Edwards as well. The seemingly system are dividing and conquering, or excuse me again. Just for the record, if I cough a lot during this podcast, I apologize. I am suffering from man flu, and everybody knows how serially debilitating man flu is. So I do apologize for any time I cough during this podcast. I will try and keep it to a minimum as much as I possibly can. Yeah, the system want to divide and conquer right now. Going after the Hardys, Leon Slater, Elijah, Joe Hendry. There may be a reason for this, and we'll get to that in a minute. But they are on a divide and conquer mission at now. But let's get back to the action on TNA now. Someone with a massive history at Full Sail University, Mr. Mayhem himself, Steve Maclin, when he was in NXT, that was his home. He defeated this week Casey Navarro from First Class. And, you know, this actually match was a really good match. I really enjoyed it. The KIA from Maclin finishes it. But, and again, when he looked up at the entrance at the end of this and he saw Eric Young and the Northern Armory watching on. But again, from a Maclin perspective, going back to your spiritual home that you were in NXT, got a great response. Casey Navarro is an absolute star in the making. There is no question about the talent of Casey Navarro. And a loss to Steve Maclin doesn't hurt him one bit, in my opinion. If anything, he will just keep getting better and better and better. AJ Francis was probably one of the MVPs of TNA last year, and Casey Navarro is certainly going to get to a higher level with TNA, no doubt about it. And they signed him last year as well. And again, in terms of what that brings to the table, Casey Navarro, I've had the pleasure of seeing him over here for Progress Wrestling, was absolutely talented as anything. And you combine that with bringing those other names in, TNA is in a very, very strong position to have an amazing 2025. Now, I mentioned Tessa Blanchard earlier on, and that perhaps there was something going on at Sacrifice. Well, exactly that there is. She bumped into Li Ying Li. I have to say it slowly, otherwise I get it fucking ass about face. But she bumped into there you go. Li Ying Li backstage, and it got into a little confrontation. Santina Marella split them up and said, look, you're going to get your match. It's going to be at Sacrifice. So they're going to be going one-on-one at Sacrifice, Tessa Blanchard and Li Ying Li. And Sacrifice on March the 14th, I do believe. A couple of Fridays' time. I can't wait. Honestly, I cannot wait for Sacrifice in a few weeks. Now, this is the funny one. Okay, so Spitfire, Jody and Dani Luna versus Ash and Heather by Elegance. The Elegances for the Knockouts Tag Team Championships. Now, if Spitfire win, I think they get a stipulation. They get to pick a forfeit, so to speak. Well, Spitfire did indeed win this match, and the forfeit was that the Elegances have to be their personal concierge. It's good. Quite incredible, to be fair. The skits afterwards were hilarious. I mean, again, the Elegances, I do think they will win the Knockouts gold eventually. I'm surprised they didn't do it on TNA this week, to be honest with you. I am really looking forward to the eventual Dani Luna singles run that I think will happen. Dani Luna, obviously over here, I've watching Dani Luna for years on the circuit, Rev Pro, Slam Masters, Attack, places like that. And I know just how great she is as a single. And I think eventually TNA will need to go down that route of having Dani as a single, because she's brilliant. Zaya Brookside's another talented lady as well. But Dani Luna, for me, eventually TNA need to start pushing her towards that Knockouts Championship. And I'm sure that they will. Obviously, they're tag champions at the moment, and the Elegances, like I said, are their concierge. But I do think eventually we'll need to see Dani Luna go for the Knockouts Championship and have that run as a single one. Obviously, at some point, TNA need to think about Harley Hudson, who they signed via the gut check. Mike DeVecchio, I mean, yes, the other one. I forgot all about this. I think it was Mike D. Mike DeVecchio was signed by TNA as well, I think, under the gut check. He is absolutely incredible. TNA need, I mean, you look at Hammerstone. Yeah, Mike D would make Hammerstone look small. And he's got the speed and the agility to go in. Mike D is another one like Brian Cage, for those of you that kind of call comparisons. Brilliant. He's a talent, and TNA really need to sort him and get him over. I think he may be injured actually at the minute, which is a shame. But yeah, they need to get him over. That's for sure. Mance Warner was next, and Sami Callihan. They got into a DQ basically. They beat Sami via DQ. It was steel chair. Sami Callihan blasting with it. Look, where we're getting to with this is that at Sacrifice in 2 weeks' time, I believe, it's going to be Mance Warner. It's going to be Sami Callihan in a street fight. Yeah, we're going to get it in a street fight. I can't wait for that. That's going to be crazy. Those two are nuts. They're absolutely nuts. Steph Delander as well. She's not afraid to take a bump and a half. It's nice to see her on the mend as well, by the way. It's always nice to see Steph Delander in the impact zone. They're gonna go nuts. They're gonna tear each other apart, and they're gonna kill each other. Not literally, but they're gonna go crazy on each other at Sacrifice. And I'm really looking forward to see what happens. I don't know too much about Mance Warner, and like until I see him properly in the ring getting on, I can't really comment on what I feel of him as a wrestler. Now I know he's done a lot for GCW. I think he come over here for Progress Wrestling, but I don't know enough about him to have an opinion. I know how good Callahan is. He's a veteran. He does his own promotion. He's got so much going for him. I just don't know enough about men's, but I'm sure coming from a GCW background, they're going to kick the living bejesus out of each other come Sacrifice in a few short weeks. Now, an interesting one match. Frankie Kazarian did beat Ace Austin. Kazarian's still got this brief opportunity, the cool shot opportunity. I still don't know when he's going to take that. Or, and this is the thought just come to my head, does Kazarian take it against Obafembi, maybe when Moose has beaten him down, or he got to a point where, maybe Obafembi beats Moose, but the system beat him down, and Kazarian comes out and shocks the world and cashes it in on the NXT World Champion, Obafembi. Can that happen? I don't even know if it can happen. It's just come into my head. Can it happen? I don't know. Is the answer. Ace Austin, by the way, been training down at the dungeon with Natty and TJ and Behan Tyson Kidd. For those of you, I know him as TJ Wilson. I've had the privilege of spending a lot of time with him. Probably about 14 years ago. He may not even remember. At WrestleMania 26. No, it was more than 14 years ago. It was like 16 years ago. At WrestleMania 26, 15 years ago. Sorry. I'll get it right. I'll get my maths right. It's been a long week, chaps. Guys and girls. Not chaps. That's sexist, right? Yeah, I had the pleasure of spending a lot of time with him in the past. Great, great guy. Harry Smith, another one. Georgia Smith, the Hearts, the Smiths. Anyway, Ace Austin's been down there. And, if he gets to be training by them as well, he's just going to get better and better and better under that tutelage. This match with Frankie Kazarian was great as well. Kaz, as I said, picking up the victory. He is the king of TNA, self-proclaimed. And I think that, for me, there was a few bits on this where there was some interference from Tyson Tariq and Wesley, of course, allowed Kaz to get the victory on that. But the Rascals did eventually come out and even up the odds at the end of it when they started attacking Austin 3-on-1 on that show. So they were looking towards a six-man tag on that one. I believe it's Sacrifice. I could be wrong on that. But anyway, let's get to the main event. And the new system, well, no, it's still the old one. It was Moose, it was Eddie Edwards and Brian Myers, did pick up a victory over the Hardys and the NXT champion, Oba Femi. Now, the NXT championship will be on the line at Roadblock on the 11th of March. 11th of March? I can't remember the date. Hold on. Let me just double check all this. It must be the 11th because the Friday's the 14th. Yes, I got it right. Hey. Anyway, and they're going for Moose and Obafemi for the NXT Heavyweight Championship. I think it's heavyweight. It could be the heavyweight, or is it the? Oh, fucking hell! It's one of them. All right. It's been a long week. Yeah. Anyway, it was a great match. The system did indeed pick up the victory in this match, which was, I would say, quite surprising, really. I did like the whole Oba's gonna kill you chant from the crowd. I did really like that. But the Colognes did come out and cause a distraction, which is allowing the system to pick up the victory in this. But Santino Marella comes out and announces two blockbusters for Sacrifice. It's going to be Moose defending the X Division Championship against Jeff Hardy in a ladder match. Jesus. Holy shit. Moose, I mean, to be honest, that is Hardy's specialty. Do not rule out Moose. And in fact, in my predictions, probably that we're going to do on the day of Sacrifice, I might add, I will probably be predicting Moose will pick up the victory in that match, and more on that when we get to it in a couple of weeks' time. But on top of that, he has announced a system against the Colognes. So the system, JDC, Eddie Edwards, Brian Myers, and the Colognes against Joe Hendry, Matt Hardy, and three partners of their choosing. Now, here's the thing. It's not, well, what hasn't been announced yet is the match isn't going to be just a standard 10-man tag. We'll talk about that. I think it's next week when it gets announced. And there's also one other person that's already in that team with Joe Hendry and Matt Hardy. But we'll talk about that next week on the show. I don't want to give it away. But coming up next week, Mike Santana versus John Skyler. Santana carries on his climb to the top in TNA. The Northern Armory, Eric Young and I can't remember their names. The Northern Armory, all right. Against Ace Austin and the Rascals next week. Isaiah Brookside back in action next week against Savannah Evans. Femi will be back next week on TNA, and the Hardys in tag team action against, well, shall we say, the Systems Colognes or just Primo and Epico, the Colognes. Don't forget, you can watch all the action live on the TNA Plus app. Get it downloaded, get it subscribed. Get on. You are missing some amazing action on TNA. You do not want to miss any more. Get that TNA Plus app. There's still no news on what's happening over here, unfortunately, in the UK in regards to a TV deal. I was hoping to bring some more on that, but there isn't any more news at this moment in time. Guys, we have stacked next week. RVD's interview drops tomorrow ahead of the Elimination Chamber. What an interview that was with Rob Van Dam. Myself and Dart star Matthew Edgar have had the pleasure of talking to him this week, and it was an absolute pleasure. Independent Showcase returns next week with Key and Cameron. We're going to have we're going to be in the recording next week as well. In fact, I can tell you, Scottish independent wrestling company Valor, who Todd Gordon, who I interviewed before, I believe, is the general manager. They'll be coming on next week as well. So much stuff going on. Obviously, Gangrel and Scott Steiner will be on. They're coming soon. When we can work it out, they will be on here. You've got my word on that. We'll be interviewing both Scott Steiner and Gangrel in the future. And also, our 1,000th piece of content is not far away. So on YouTube, back in 2022, we're on to like 920 pieces of content right now on YouTube. That includes shorts. I appreciate they're not necessarily episodes as such. Some of these are shorts, some of these are promos and interviews and whatnot. But we're getting close to 1,000 pieces of content. And a big thank you to everyone that's been watching the show. But this has been the TNA recap on the Hitting the Turnbuckle podcast. I have been the one, the only AC. And until I'm back, Elimination Chamber review. Maybe SmackDown review in the morning. We will see. But until then, everybody, take care now. Bye-bye and stay safe.